Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became six-path savior and united the hearts of Yugito, Temari and Kurotsuchi, part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Naruto walked down the streets of Konoha, covering his mouth as he yawned. The sun had only risen a few short hours ago and most of the people of the village were still within their homes, leaving the streets almost empty. Making his way to the training ground his team frequented, the blonde raised his hand to his eye, moving his sunglasses out of the way before rubbing it. As he neared the gates, he saw his teammates coming from different directions. He smiled and waved at Sakura as she approached. "Morning, Sakura," Naruto greeted before turning to Sasuke, his hand clenching as he glared at the Uchiha who glared back before scoffing and turning towards the training ground. Sakura sighed at their behavior before she and Naruto followed after their teammate. "Geez, they're at it already. Ever since Wave they've been even worse, if that's even possible." Naruto turned to his crush. "Hey, Sakura, you think Kakashi-sensei's going to be on time today?" Sakura looked at him as if he'd just asked if the sky was blue. "You must be joking. You should know better than that by now." Naruto sighed, hanging his head down. "Yeah, guess you're right." He then looked at her with a slight grin. "Good thing we have Zabuza and Haku to help us out now, huh? I'm sure they won't keep us waiting until we're dead on our feet." Sakura shivered slightly at the thought of the former Kirijonin. "Are you crazy? At least with Kakashi we didn't have to worry about him actually killing us." Haku seemed alright to her, though she did hold some negative sentiments towards him for what he did to Sasuke, but after nearly killing them and learning what she did about him she still found Zabuza a frightening figure. "Oh, come on. They're not that bad." "Well, I guess Haku seems alright," Sakura admitted. "At least they seem to take this seriously, unlike Kakashi." Sasuke spoke, adding his 2 cents. "He does usually spend most of his time with us reading his book. I wonder what it's about, anyway." Naruto commented, looking to the sky before turning to his crush again with a smile. "So, Sakura, how about after we finish training today you and I?" "Shut up, Naruto," Sakura suddenly yelled. Naruto backed away slightly when the girl balled her hand and raised her fist over his head, but was unable to get out of range before she brought it down on his head, causing him to kneel down, grabbing his now aching head. "It's too early to deal with that." "Ah, come on. He's not the only one with an awesome bloodline anymore," Naruto said as he raised his head, nursing the lump that had grown through his hair. He didn't think much of it yet. After all, he didn't even really know what they did yet besides what it did to his vision and those 2 abilities that he still had no idea how to use, but he hoped that might appeal to Sakura. "And you think that makes up for everything bad about you?" The pink-haired girl grumbled as she turned away before adding in a slightly wistful tone. "His Sharingan isn't the only thing that makes him amazing." Sasuke seemed unaffected by her comment. Naruto hung his head dejectedly. "Sakura." The trio soon reached the clearing, before stopping dead in their tracks, almost comical expressions of shock on the 2 more expressive genins' faces. Even Sasuke's eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly at the sight that awaited them. Zabuza and Haku had arrived before them. That, they had expected. What they hadn't expected was to see Kakashi leaning against a tree, reading his book, having arrived on time despite all the evidence that such a thing would never happen. Even more surprising was his reaction to their arrival. He glanced at them out of the corner of his exposed eye before putting his book away. He then stepped away from the tree and gave them a slight wave. "Hey guys." The copy ninja greeted. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Naruto stared at him incredulously. "Kakashi-sensei, you're actually on time." But you've never been on time. Not since the day we became a team," Sakura said, looking as if she thought the world might be ending. "Have I really given you the impression that I can never be punctual?" the copy ninja asked. Silence answered him. The Jonin's sweat dropped. To be honest, he probably would have been late, had the Hokage not threatened to give him missions with Guy and his mini-clone, Lee, if he didn't clean up that aspect of his act the previous night. It took all his discipline not to shudder at the thought. Well anyway, let's get started. We'll pick up where we left off yesterday. And Naruto, don't forget your clones. He said, pulling out a scroll. The blonde genin nodded and 10 clones poofed into existence. The doppelgangers groaned as Kakashi opened the scroll and gave them the books. Naruto looked up at his sensei as his clones reluctantly took the reading material. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, why can't we move on to learning new jutsu? I mean, if the tree climbing exercise was enough to let us fight Haku, wouldn't it be better if we spent our time learning some cool new techniques? Sakura put a hand on her hip. Yeah right, what fight were you watching? In case you've forgotten, if Haku was more cold-hearted, you know, like most missing nin you're liable to run into, Sasuke would be dead. And for that matter, you'd probably be too. Hell, if you hadn't awakened your bloodline when you did, you probably would have ended up in the same condition as the Uchiha brat. Zabuza said to the blonde, who immediately looked to the ground. Kakashi nodded. They're right, you know. You all have a long way to go before you reach Haku's level. That's just all I could teach you in the time we had. That aside, this is essential for you to learn. Think of it this way, with the control you had before you graduated. Let's say you could create 2 standard clones. With the level of control you have now, you can create 3 clones using less chakra. In other words, the better your control, the more powerful your jutsu will be and the less energy it'll take to use them. You need the most work in this respect, Naruto. Out of the 3 of you, your control is the worst, meaning you waste a lot of chakra in your jutsu. Understand? Naruto nodded somewhat reluctantly. Yeah, I get it. Zabuza turned a thoughtful eye to Kakashi. Speaking of wasting chakra, something's been bugging me for a while. Kakashi raised a brow. Oh, and what's that? Back at the bridge, that technique you tried to shove through my chest, it was basically a solid blade of lightning chakra, wasn't it? Sasuke looked up at that, now more interested because an apparently powerful technique of his element was being discussed. Kakashi nodded. That's right. It's my signature technique. Reikiri. The demon of the mist tilted his head. Something like that's gotta be a bitch on the reserves. In fact, I can't remember you using another jutsu for the rest of our fight or against those mercenaries Gato hired. On top of that, I know from an old acquaintance of mine that transplanted dojutsu like your Sharingan take more chakra to use than they do in a natural wielder. My guess is you didn't have enough chakra to pull off another one of those, or any other high-level jutsu for that matter. So, why did you use that attack on me when I was pinned down by those hounds of yours and I couldn't move or defend myself? You could have just thrown a kunai for the same effect. The copy ninja remained silent as the group stared at him. You just wanted to be flashy and show off your best move, didn't you? Kakashi chuckled and gave them his eye smile as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Zabuza face-palmed while Haku gave the Jonin a neutral expression and the genin gave him looks that showed he'd lost some of their respect. You stupid bastard. Naruto's eye twitched, a tick mark developing on his forehead as he glared at his sensei. What was that you were saying about wasting chakra, Kakashi-sensei? For all you knew, Sasuke and I were still screwed and you go and tire yourself out like that. And he has the nerve to tell us not to waste our energy, Sakura thought. There are times I question how he made it to Jonin, Sasuke thought. Now, I had the utmost confidence in you. Kakashi spoke to the 3 genin in a placating tone, which obviously didn't work in the slightest, before turning back to the former Mist Anbu. And you know, you should be grateful I opted to use my best move. If I had simply thrown a kunai as you suggested, you would have died. Zabuza scoffed at that while Kakashi made a mental note not to waste chakra like that again. Hey, it's not too late to learn something new until you're dead. The silver-haired Jonin cleared his throat. Anyway, Isn't it about time we got started? The other masked ninja let out another scoff before responding. Guess you're right. He crossed his arms and grinned under his mask as he turned to the sole female in the group. Hope you do better than you did yesterday, Pinky. You looked like a pincushion by the time we were through. Sakura paled as she realized this meant she'd once more be dodging Haku's needles while trying to remain on the water. Haku once again gave the pink-haired girl an apologetic look as Kakashi walked across the water, the surface rippling at each step until he arrived at its center. Alright, come on, and try not to fall in this time. Kakashi beckoned. Naruto and Sasuke ran onto the water with Sakura close behind when she saw Haku pull out his needles. As the two male genin tried, and failed, to maintain their footing on the water's surface, Sakura struggled to dodge groups of 3 Senbon apiece. After his 12th time having to climb out of the water, Naruto growled in frustration. Damn it, why can't I get this? It can't be that much harder than tree climbing, right? He turned to the other soaked genin, who had just climbed out of the water himself and was stumbling as he balanced himself on the water's surface. The blonde then turned to Sakura, wincing as he saw her get hit with another volley of Senbon, despite her best efforts. He remembered what it was like to be on the receiving end of those needles. She makes this look easy. He then got an idea. He narrowed his eyes as he channeled his chakra into them, seeing the world fade to shades of black with white outlines as his dojutsu activated. He had to admit that, though it was strange at first, the way he saw the world through his new eyes was invigorating. He could see everything in perfect clarity. He could detect every minute movement or shift in his field of vision. To him, their chakra, normally invisible unless in large amounts, could be seen clear as day. Although all dojutsu could also see chakra in such a manner, only the Byakugan surpassed its perceptive capabilities in this regard. He could vaguely see it coursing through their bodies, though unlike the Byakugan, he couldn't completely see the chakra network or make out the tenketsus. He saw the core of the chakra network, located in the center of the stomach, as a ball of blue fire, and he saw the same effect of dancing flames wherever chakra was being gathered. He watched as Sakura successfully dodged a few more waves of Senbon, yelping as she twisted her body to avoid one group that nearly hit her side. The Rinnegan bearer watched how her chakra flowed, absently noting that her chakra core didn't seem to be as bright as the others. He put that aside for now and returned to the task at hand. Watching his pink-haired teammate, he attempted to gauge the amount of chakra she was using to remain afloat and observed how the quantity was in constant flux to compensate for the moving of the water. He then turned and did the same for Kakashi. After watching both of them and how their chakra flowed for about a minute and channeling his chakra into his own feet to practice, he closed his eyes and climbed out of the water, doing his best to imitate Sakura's chakra flow, watching his feet and how his own chakra interacted with the river's surface. He stumbled twice before he came to a stop, holding his arms out to help balance himself. Naruto smiled at his success as he took a few shaky steps on the water's surface. Although he still had to concentrate hard to maintain it and his feet still slipped through quite a few times, this had definitely helped. Meanwhile, Sasuke, who had just climbed out of the water, threw a glare in Naruto's direction when he saw he was doing better. Though he couldn't figure out what Naruto was doing differently, he had tried what Naruto had earlier, only to find his Sharingan's ability to perceive chakra wasn't good enough to gauge such a thing. He climbed out of the water once more and, after a few minutes, fell back in. This time, he growled as he looked at Naruto, who was managing aside from the occasional incident where his feet sunk into the water. He climbed out once more, but lasted a mere 10 seconds, his anger causing his control to slip. Kakashi noticed his Sharingan-wielding student's frustration towards Naruto's faster progress, but before he could decide on what to do, Zabuza called him and Haku over. Raising a brow at what the former missing nin could want, he joined him and Haku on the river's shore. Naruto, who soon stumbled and turned his attention back to his feet, Sasuke, who was still in the water, looked curiously after the three. Sakura immediately stopped channeling her chakra and sunk into the water. She had long since passed the point of exhaustion and would have fallen in had it not been for the pressing need to dodge those needles. You okay, Sakura? The Jinchuriki asked as he carefully moved closer to her. Zabuza-sensei wasn't kidding, I need to work on my stamina. The girl replied before turning her head to look at him. How do you two keep this up? Hope you enjoyed your break, brats. Zabuza called out, getting their attention before his gaze fell the two male genin. Your control is pathetic. What's your academy teaching you genin these days? You should have mastered tree climbing by the time you graduated and you should have progressed much farther than this after a day. The two glared at him. I think you could do with some additional motivation. And Sakura, it's time to kick things up a notch anyway. He then nodded to Haku, who proceeded to make the tiger hand seal. Water clone jutsu, Haku called out, as water rose in front of him, forming 5 copies of himself, all of whom proceeded to pull out Senbon. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as Naruto and Sakura paled. The blonde turned to his female teammate as the water clones lined up at the shore. Sakura, I think you might have been right about Zabuza-sensei teaching us. The pink-haired genin could only nod. You brats should know the drill by now. Zabuza said before his gaze turned slightly menacing. And don't even think about trying to escape underwater. Naruto leapt into the air, dodging a wave of Senbon before landing on the water's surface. He barely noticed how he, and Sasuke too, were now standing perfectly on the surface of the water. His attention was on the needles that could come flying at him from any direction and the dozen that were already painfully lodged in his flesh. The group had spent all day on this. There had been a few short breaks and lunch around midday. Out of the 3, he was in the middle in terms of damage. Sakura had fallen into the water due to lack of energy several times and had so many needles sticking out of her that the blonde wouldn't even bother to try counting them. Sasuke had about half the amount he had stuck in him. Unlike on the bridge, Haku televised his attacks and made sure his needles hit where they'd do the least damage. The 3 dodged Senbon for a few more minutes before Kakashi's voice rang out. Alright, I think that's enough for today. Haku stopped, his clones falling apart into water as he finally let up. Naruto and Sasuke breathed heavily as they took a moment to rest. Sakura made a slight groan of exhaustion before she simply fell face first into the water, flipping around and floating on her back, unable to even muster the energy to move to the shore. Naruto saw Sakura lying stagnant in the water and took a few steps towards her, his movements shaky due to his lack of control. Sakura, are you alright? Naruto asked as he approached her. Sakura groaned. I've never been so exhausted, my legs feel like lead and I can't feel my arms. I don't think I could even make it to the shore, she said, the tone of her voice conveying her lack of energy to the blonde. Naruto allowed himself to sink into the water and wrapped his arm around her, pulling the pink-haired girl to the shore. Thanks, Naruto, she said. Normally, she would be somewhat disappointed that Sasuke wasn't the one who helped her, but right now, she didn't care. Don't mention it, the blonde replied as he swam back to shore with his teammate in tow. Sasuke, who had just reached the shore, looked back for a moment as Kakashi began to make a fire for his 3 soaked students. Cold he may be, but he wouldn't have left Sakura in the water. Seeing that Naruto was taking care of it, he began the task of pulling the Senbon lodged in his skin out. Naruto soon reached the lake's edge and helped Sakura to the fire, sitting her down before they both joined Sasuke in removing the Senbon stuck in them. The ice user looked down at the 3 genin. Sorry, guys. Naruto looked up at the androgynous teen. It's no problem, you were just doing as you were told. He said before wincing as he removed another needle. Well, I have to admit this worked out well. We'll have to keep this up until you master the exercise. Kakashi said, causing the pink-haired girl to groan. Hey, Naruto. Sasuke spoke up, giving him a slightly irritated glance. Naruto looked a little surprised that Sasuke spoke up to him before he glared slightly at his fellow dojutsu user. What do you want? Sasuke seemed to struggle with himself for a moment. He didn't like asking for help, and the last time he asked the blonde for help returned to the surface of his mind. After a moment, Sasuke responded. How did you suddenly improve back there? Naruto's eyes widened before a mischievous glint appeared in them and a smirk spread across his face. What do you mean, Sasuke? He asked while shrugging his shoulders. The raven-haired boy gave him a fierce look. You know what I mean. Naruto raised his hands in a placating gesture. Alright, I was just playing, he said, the smirk never leaving his face. I just used my dojutsu to see what Sakura and Kakashi were doing with their chakra and imitated it. Sasuke's eye twitched. What? Don't tell me the Sharingan can't do that. Guess the Uchiha clan's not so great after all. His rival grit his teeth in anger at that. Sakura threw the blonde an angry stare. Naruto, shut up and stop mocking Sasuke. Don't act all superior just because you have a better bloodline. She normally would have hit him for that, but 1, she was currently too tired, and 2, she was kind of grateful to him for pulling her out of the water. Naruto squinted his eyes and pointed at the raven-haired genin. But he thinks he's better than everyone because he's from the great Uchiha clan. He said the clan's name with sarcasm. He didn't think being from a great clan, even being the last survivor of a clan, made someone great or special. He thought his new eyes were kind of cool and would brag about them, but he didn't really think he was any more special than he was before either. What's wrong with rubbing in that his clan isn't so great after all? Maybe the fact that he's still the rookie of the year and you're still the dead last. Sakura replied sarcastically. Those eyes might be the most powerful bloodline in the world, but that doesn't change that you're still a sorry excuse for a shinobi. And they're not going to do you much good until you actually learn to use them. Naruto hung his head down before his and the other genin's attention was drawn by a laugh from Zabuza. Ha, a sorry excuse for a shinobi. You're one to talk, he said, his eyes showing amusement. While it's true, the kid needs a lot of work, at least he showed some talent back in Wave. I hate to admit that a genin pulled one over on me, but he did mastermind that trick during our first encounter and he has managed to learn an advanced jutsu fresh out of the academy. So far, all you have going for you are chakra control and book smarts. If the two of you fought seriously right now, he'd beat your sorry into the ground. Now Sakura hung her head. Naruto, though grateful that for Zabuza's support, was about to protest what he said about Sakura when Kakashi spoke up. Alright, settle down, guys. Kakashi commented before directing his gaze to the 3 genin. It's nice to see you still have enough energy to fight amongst yourselves, but depreciating each other like this is hardly productive. Now, if you're all finished pulling the Senbon out, I brought some snacks. Once the group had finished their snacks and the genin had completely dried off, they all got ready to leave as Kakashi put the fire. The group had finished their snacks and the genin had completely dried off, they all got ready to leave as Kakashi put the fire out. Sakura, Haku said, and the girl made a sound of acknowledgement. I'd like you to read these, he said as he pulled out 4 books. Sakura raised a brow as she took them, looking at the cover of the one on top. The Encyclopedia of Plants. Haku nodded. The other 3 are on human anatomy, the making of healing salves, antidotes and poisons, and basic treatment of injuries. As I said, I believe you would make a good medical ninja. These are things you have to learn before you can really call yourself one. Even if you're not interested or it turns out that it's not your cup of tea, they're still an interesting read, or at least I think so. And it may come in handy someday. Sakura smiled. Though she still felt some slight ill will towards the boy for defeating Sasuke and making him appear dead, Sakura had to admit he was a nice person. Thank you, Haku. I'll be sure to take a look at them. The older boy smiled back. You're welcome. I hope there's no animosity from our training. Sakura shook her head. Nah, it's like Naruto said, you were just doing as you were told. she said before seeing Sasuke walking away. Hey, Sasuke, how about we go get something to eat on our way home? Was Sasuke's response before he walked away with his hands in his pockets, causing Sakura's shoulders to slump. Naruto noticed and said excitedly, I'd be happy to join you, Sakura. Sakura, too tired from all the training they did to yell at him, said, why would I want to hang out with you? And began walking off. Now it was Naruto's turn to slump his shoulders, before he too began a slow march back to his apartment. He wondered if he'd ever catch a break with her. Sakura soon reached her house, made her way up to her room and fell backwards onto the bed, letting the books she was carrying fall beside her. She shivered as she remembered that they were going to do that again tomorrow. The pink-haired kunoichi turned her head and glanced at the books beside her. She always did enjoy reading and prided herself on her book smarts. Taking the encyclopedia on plants and opening it to the first page, Sakura began reading. Half an hour later, she was thoroughly engrossed in what she was learning. The genin returned to the training ground the next day and spent the first half of their day dodging Senbon on the water's surface. They continued until their break, when Naruto once again had to pull a completely exhausted Sakura out of the water. They had lunch together and now stood before their senseis. We're going to do something a little different today. Kakashi began, taking a few steps forward. You three are going to spar with each other, first Naruto and Sasuke, with the winner fighting Sakura. Normally, it would have been Naruto and Sakura first, but with the blonde's crush on the young kunoichi, he may hold back or let himself lose. When we started, Zabuza took stock of all your abilities. Today, we want to focus on your taijutsu. Naruto raised a brow. What? He said, drawing out the word. But Kakashi-sensei, weren't we going to work on our chakra control some more? I think I almost got the hang of walking on water. Sasuke smirked. What's wrong? Afraid I'll put you in your place? Naruto glared at his teammate and snorted. Hardly. I'll be happy to kick your any day of the week. I just want to hurry and get to our elemental training so I can learn some cool new jutsu. Sasuke grunted in response. He had to agree with the Rinnegan bearer there. Though he was still a little irritated by the fact that he didn't have the affinity his clan prided itself on, he wasn't going to let that hold him back and he was looking forward to seeing what he could do with his element. Well, we felt that, since we were working on your chakra control, we should look at all your basic skills. They are important, you know. You'll suffer down the line if you skip ahead to the more advanced arts without mastering the fundamentals. Kakashi explained. Zabuza crossed his arms as he looked down at the genin. Once we see how far along you are with the basics, we'll correct anything that's lacking and work out what fighting style would suit you while perfecting your water walking skill. After you've got a handle on the basics and begun forming your own fighting style, we'll start your elemental training. You should be able to work all this out and at least learn a few elemental jutsu before the exams start. We'll also try to improve your teamwork, though as I mentioned earlier, we won't devote as much time to that. And if you learn quickly enough, we'll get you started on collaborative jutsu. Collaborative jutsu? Sakura inquired and Naruto looked at the Jonin with a curious expression. Those words also caught Sasuke's interest. The Uchiha frowned slightly as he listened intently. Collaborative jutsu refers to techniques that are a combination of several jutsu or a jutsu that requires multiple users. Zabuza explained. Kakashi nodded. For example, you've all learned that the wind element is weak to the fire element, right? If you were to try to combat a wind technique with a fire one, unless the wind technique is far more advanced and powerful, the wind will feed the flames and backfire on you. However, if you were to combine a wind technique with an Ali's fire jutsu. Naruto grinned. I get it. You'll get a huge firestorm, right? Kakashi nodded. Correct. Another example would be a barrier technique that requires multiple users to create and maintain. Anyway, for that reason, we've decided to start Naruto off with the water and wind elements. That way, you'll have all the elements and potential combinations between you. Naruto looked excited as he thought of what lied ahead of them. And what about trying out sub-elements? I think you should master all the primary elements before you try to learn those, if you even can. You would need to master the composing elements anyway, so even attempting that is a long way off. And of course, it wouldn't matter if Haku isn't willing to share his family's unique jutsu with you. Kakashi said, giving Haku a glance at the end. The androgynous teen shrugged. I don't mind. If he is capable of learning it, I have no problem teaching him my clan's arts. Kakashi gave the boy one of his eye smiles. Glad to hear it, he said before moving to the center of the clearing. Now, let's begin. Naruto, Sasuke, take your places. And Naruto, don't forget your clones. The two genin took their places, Naruto taking a few moments to create 10 shadow clones, who were given a scroll containing a few books by Kakashi and, after groaning about the titles and some coaxing, began reading on the outskirts of the training ground. Sasuke smirked as he got into his combat stance. Ready to lose, Naruto? Naruto gave a grin. That's my line. Today's the day I finally wipe that smug look off your face. In your dreams, loser. The Uchiha scoffed. There was a moment's pause before Kakashi raised his hand. Alright guys, no dojutsu okay. And, begin. The two genin charged at each other, both looking forward to this fight. Naruto wanted to show his rival that he wasn't the same person he was in the academy, and Sasuke wanted, if subconsciously, to prove to himself that he was still above the blonde after the events at Wave. As Naruto neared his opponent, he threw a punch at the raven-haired boy. Sasuke grabbed his wrist with his right hand as the fist approached and redirected the blow, bringing his own fist up to deliver an uppercut to the blonde's face. Naruto leaned back, narrowly evading the attack before lashing out with a sweeping kick, forcing the Uchiha to let go of his hand and jump backwards. Before Sasuke had even landed on his feet, the blonde Jinchuriki had launched himself at his adversary. Having remembered the lessons from Wave, Naruto channeled chakra to the bottom of his feet in order to increase his speed, allowing him to move faster than he normally could. This allowed him to close the distance between him and Sasuke very quickly. It was clear that Naruto had every intention of ending this battle as fast as possible to show Sasuke who the best ninja on this team was. The moment Naruto reached his raven-haired opponent, he reared his fist back near his head, as if winding up for the pitch, and shot it forward towards Sasuke's head. Even without the use of a dojutsu, it was clear that Naruto had pumped a lot of chakra into his attack. His entire fist was coated in writhing blue energy. The attack was one that would be quite devastating if it had actually hit. Sasuke had seen the punch coming quite a while before it was actually thrown. It was kind of not to with the way Naruto his fist all the way back, like he was expecting the extra distance to increase the power. What he forgot to think about was that, even if it did increase the power, launching an attack from that position added to the length that his fist needed to move, which in turn increased the amount of time it took for his fist to go from point A to point B, with point B obviously being Sasuke's face. Therefore it came as no surprise to those watching when Sasuke was able to dodge the attack. A deft and nimble sidestep followed with a slight use of his hand to nudge the blonde's attack aside caused it to miss entirely. At the same time, Sasuke quickly stepped into Naruto's guard, where he countered by landing a powerful blow on the blonde genin's stomach. This was soon followed up with a kick to the chest before Naruto could react, the results of which caused him to stumble back with a hand on his chest and a pained grimace on his face. Sasuke smirked as he watched Naruto lift his head and glare at him before jumping back into the fray. The two began to exchange blows, Sasuke deflecting Naruto's attacks and countering, while Naruto avoided most of the Uchiha's attacks. As the Jonin watched, Zabuza confirmed his assessment. Though it was true, the blonde's taijutsu was passable, but that was due to his strength and speed, which were decent. His style was more like that of a brawler than a ninja and not really that effective. He relied on his unpredictable strategies, his stamina and his clones to overwhelm his opponents. Sasuke used his family's taijutsu style, and he had to admit he was good at it given his age. It didn't help the blonde that his opponent was faster than he was, making this fight fairly one-sided. Seeing Sasuke throw a punch at his chest, Naruto raised his arms and crossed them over his chest. Feeling his rival's fist collide with his guard, he prepared to launch a counter-attack before he felt the wind get knocked out of him. Capitalizing on the opening created when Naruto blocked his punch, the Uchiha had brought his knee to the blonde's stomach. As Naruto bent forward involuntarily, he saw Sasuke's fist rising towards his chest. Having no time to react, all he could do was watch the fist collided with his chest. The next thing he felt was a left hook to the face that sent him staggering back. He managed to stay on his feet, determined not to let his rival win again. He turned his head back just in time to see Sasuke running at him, intending to continue his assault. He brought his hand up just in time to block another blow from his adversary. The Uchiha heir narrowed his eyes when he saw Naruto block his punch. Before his opponent could retaliate, he spun around, extending his leg for a sweeping kick. Naruto jumped backwards to dodge. Naruto charged forward as soon as he touched the ground and threw a punch at the Uchiha's face. Sasuke ducked under the attack, grabbing the blonde's wrist and using his momentum to pull him forward. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as Sasuke pulled him forward before the dark-haired boy lashed out with a kick to his unprotected chest, knocking the wind out of him and sending him a few feet into the air. Sasuke leapt after him, delivering 2 punches and a kick to the blonde's torso before grabbing him as they fell to the ground, pinning the blonde on his stomach with his elbow to his neck. The Rinnegan bearer growled, realizing he'd lost to his rival again. "Well, I guess that's it," Kakashi said as Sasuke let the grumbling blonde up. "Yeah, way to go, Sasuke." Sakura cheered from the sidelines. "All right, girlie, you're up next. Take your place." Zabuza spoke, grinning under his mask as he saw Sakura's shocked expression. Kakashi nodded. "That's right, you're up against Sasuke. Now come on. And please, try your best." After a few moments, Sakura hesitantly stepped up to her position across from her crush. The kunoichi took a deep breath before raising her head and looking at her teammate, who looked at her with a disinterested expression. Sasuke felt this was a waste of his time. He wanted to fight strong opponents. Naruto now counted among people he considered worth testing himself against after his actions in Wave. Sakura, not so much. Sakura got into a combat stance, not sure she'd be able to attack but she'd at least try to defend herself. Both Jonin noted that her stance was the generic one taught to all students at the academy. After a moment, Kakashi once again raised his hand. "Begin." What followed wasn't even worth being called a match. Sakura's stance at the beginning was a textbook perfect example of her chosen style, which was actually something of a problem. Now, while having a perfect stance is a good thing, the technique taught at the academy was never meant to be anything more than a placeholder. It was a fairly balanced style with few openings, so it was fairly effective to be sure, but as it was a cookie-cutter method it didn't play to any individual ninja's strengths. Sure, one could take it and progress until one was a highly proficient taijutsu fighter, but it would be better and easier to find a style that suited you. It was meant to give the prospective genin a way to fight and defend themselves while they learned what their strengths were until they found a fighting style that took advantage of their natural talents or to provide the building blocks for their own, unique style. Sakura had never tried to deviate from it in the slightest. On top of that, although it may have had something to do with her crush on Sasuke holding her back, her stance fell apart when she actually moved. Her moves showed that her form was as good as it was due to the drills done at the academy as they revealed a total lack of fighting experience. While it was expected that she fall for a feint, she shouldn't fall for all of them and she often overextended herself on defense, her reluctance over fighting her crush keeping her from ever displaying offense. And she was slow, comparable to the average academy students 2 years her junior in both speed and reflexes. Sasuke did, at least, go easy on her. His attacks weren't meant to hurt her, simply to open up her guard so he could take her down easily. Okay, we've seen enough. Kakashi began. Sakura, Naruto, I'm not going to lie, both of you need a lot of work. Sasuke, your form's good, but there's always room for improvement. Naruto looked slightly dejected at the evaluation and Sakura took it even worse. Sasuke simply grunted an acknowledgement. Now, we'll get started on perfecting your taijutsu styles for the next few hours. Sakura, I think Haku would be best suited to aid you. Naruto, I think Zabuza would be the best fit for you. And that leaves me to take care of Sasuke. Sasuke smirked at getting the teacher he considered the strongest, his satisfaction all the greater after his earlier defeat of his rival. Naruto looked shocked before clenching his fists. Of course, you're going to hand us off so that you can focus on Sasuke. He said angrily, emphasizing his rival's name. He was so tired of everyone treating Sasuke like he was the best. Sakura glared at the blonde. Naruto, don't talk to our sensei like that. She chided. Zabuza tilted his head to the side and raised a brow. Oh, you don't like the idea of training under me, brat? He asked in a slightly annoyed tone. No, I just don't like that he's playing favorites. Now, Naruto, calm down. I have my reasons for this. Kakashi said, moving his hand in a placating gesture. He actually wanted to train Naruto as much as he wanted to train Sasuke. The two were the last relatives of the deceased members of his team, not counting Sasuke's brother. But the less said about him, the better. Oh yeah, like what? Zabuza's just better suited for what I have in mind for you, and I'm better suited to help Sasuke. Kakashi shrugged. One of my own teammates, from when I was a genin to a jonin, was an Uchiha, so I have a good grasp of their fighting style. I'm also the only other person in the village with the Sharingan. You Naruto, right now, are a power-type fighter. You overwhelm your opponents with your strength, which is how Zabuza fights when he's not relying on stealth. The explanation calmed the young Uzumaki down a bit, though he still looked annoyed. On top of that, I think you might have some untapped potential in stealth. You did manage to paint the Hokage monument without anyone noticing. Haku gaped while Zabuza gave his fellow Jonin an incredulous stare. What? Kakashi shrugged. Shocking, isn't it? But true. He somehow managed to cover all the Hokage's faces in graffiti and no one noticed until he was almost finished. It should go without saying that such a thing is a quite impressive feat, especially in a ninja village. Naruto gave a prideful chuckle while Zabuza looked at the monument in disbelief. Yeah, and then he had to spend all day cleaning it up. Sakura reminded him, deflating the blonde. Fine, Naruto said after a pause before throwing Kakashi a light glare. I guess I can't complain. I am getting trained by the guy who threw you into a ball of water, forcing your genin to bail you out. Zabuza chuckled as Kakashi's eye twitched slightly. Well, the kid and I might get along after all. Zabuza thought as Kakashi was reminded of his near death. Don't mock our sensei, Sakura admonished. Cha, you tell him. Her inner self spoke within her mind. Let's get started already. Come on, kid, Zabuza said, walking away and gesturing for the blonde to follow as Haku did the same for Sakura. The former mist ninja led the blonde into the forest until they found another clearing. Boy, let me be frank. I'm surprised you managed to graduate. He spoke in a blunt tone, causing Naruto's eyes to widen before his expression shifted into one of anger. The blonde took a step forward in an attempt at a threatening gesture. What? Until now, your control sucked. You fight like some brawler instead of a real ninja, you have no real stance or taijutsu style. And from what I've been told, you only know one jutsu outside the basic ones. If that stunt you pulled on the bridge is any indication, you don't even have a real grasp of the basics of shinobi combat. Let's face it, you haven't shown any actual talent. The only way you could possibly win a fight is by overwhelming your opponent with the sheer number of clones you can make. Shut the hell up. If that's true, Then how did we get Kakashi-sensei out of that mess you put him in? Zabuza's eyes narrowed and Naruto smirked. What's wrong? Embarrassed that you got outsmarted by a genin. Well, if you're so confident, why don't you show me what you've got? Gladly. Naruto said as he charged at Zabuza, activating his dojutsu as he closed the distance. Naruto reached into his weapon pouch and threw 4 shuriken at Zabuza, who easily deflected them all. Thinking he saw an opening as Zabuza knocked the last projectile away like the back of his hand, threw a punch aimed at the Jonin's chest. Zabuza easily caught the attack, brought his knee to the blonde's chest and kicked him hard enough to send him across the clearing and into the tree hard enough to shatter the bark, causing splinters to rain down as the boy fell to the ground. Naruto shifted into a crouch and deactivated his dojutsu, bringing his hands together to form a cross-shaped hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a huge explosion of smoke, Zabuza found himself surrounded by clones. Zabuza gave a short laugh as the clones charged at him from every direction. None of them even lasted a second. Zabuza felled each clone in a single attack. Come on, kid. Do you honestly think this is going to help you? All the clones jumped back and launched shuriken at the former mist ninja from every direction. Zabuza grabbed his sword and spun, deflecting them all with a single movement, only for every one to transform into a clone of the blonde. Zabuza scoffed, easily destroying all the clones. Only for his eyes to widen as Naruto's fist came out of the smoke cloud inches away from him. Using the smoke from the clones as a cover, pretty good. He smirked as he leaned back and spun, extending his leg and kicking the blonde, sending him into the ground, bouncing twice before coming to a stop on his stomach. Naruto got on one knee, wiping some blood off of his mouth as the remaining clones prepared to launch themselves at the masked Jonin, who simply crossed his arms and waited. The Rinnegan bearer threw every attack he could at Zabuza, to no avail. Zabuza destroyed the final clone with a kick before finally deciding enough was enough. Seeing Naruto brought his hands together to create more clones, the swordsman shot forward, punching Naruto in the stomach before delivering another harsh blow to his face, sending him to the ground. When he tried to get up, Zabuza brought his foot down on his back, pinning him to the ground. You done yet? Zabuza asked as he looked down at the genin, who struggled for a few moments before giving up. Zabuza moved his foot off of his back and Naruto slowly rose to his feet. See kid, your entire fighting style revolves around overwhelming your opponents with those clones. Without them, you've got nothing. You're not even throwing your punches or kicking properly. You've got a pretty good grasp of exploiting weaknesses, not that that's going to do you much good with your limited abilities. Those eyes of yours won't help you either, if you don't know how to use them. From your lack of control, I'm guessing you can't even dispel genjutsu and you've got one technique outside the basics. I'll admit, your strategies are good, but you're not going to get anywhere relying on clones and that ridiculous stamina you've got. Naruto hung his head. But, this means you're a blank slate. You're just a rookie, it's not surprising you've got nothing going for you yet. Everything you're lacking, you can learn as long as you actually put some effort into it and don't expect everything to just come to you. Even geniuses have to work at this. As for your taijutsu, all we've got to do is find the style that best suits you. Your strategies and your ability to learn such an advanced jutsu despite how recently you became a ninja shows you have potential that hasn't been exploited yet. Naruto's head rose as Zabuza continued, until a smile spread across his face when he finished. So, kid, you ready to get started? Do you even have to ask? You're talking to the guy who's going to be Hokage someday. Naruto said. Zabuza gave a short laugh. That's so. Yep. So throw everything you've got at me. Naruto pumped his fist confidently. His confidence didn't waver, even as a sadistic smirk broke out under Zabuza's mask. The door to Naruto's apartment opened, revealing a beaten and bloody blonde who entered and closed and locked the door behind him. He then dragged his feet through his apartment, heading straight to his bed before falling face forward onto the mattress, not even bothering to change out of his bright orange tracksuit. After the fight in his lecture, Zabuza sparred with the blonde, pounding him into the ground with little mercy, analyzing the genin's strengths and weaknesses, taking note of every aspect of the blonde's fighting style and how he moved, attacked and dodged. By the end of it, Naruto had barely been standing. Thankful for his natural healing ability, Naruto's purple-ringed eyes closed and he soon fell asleep, aware that by the time he woke up, he'd be fully healed. Naruto once again stood before Zabuza in the clearing outside the third training ground after his team finished their water walking exercises and split into separate groups. The masked Jonin had lined up 2 logs near the edge of the tree line about 2 yards away from each other before the 3 genin had arrived. Zabuza folded his arms as he looked down at the genin. Let's get started. Listen up, kid. I don't like repeating myself. The blonde nodded. Before we begin, the first thing we're going to have to do is unlearn everything you know right now. Naruto gave him a questioning and slightly shocked stare. What do you mean, I have to unlearn everything? I spent years getting these moves down. You shouldn't have wasted your time. Like I said, you can't even throw a decent punch. You fight like a brawler, putting all of your weight into every single one of your attacks and hoping they'll hit something. This not only means that if you miss, you'll overextend yourself, but it will also leave you open to counterattacks. You also waste a lot of movement and you broadcast your attacks. A fighter with any experience would see your strikes coming from a mile away. As Zabuza spoke, Naruto's shoulders kept slumping more and more, like a several-ton boulder was falling on him with each remark Zabuza made about his taijutsu style, or lack thereof. What this means is that we need to start from scratch, Zabuza continued, either not noticing or not caring about the blonde's increasing depression. It was likely the latter. I'm going to teach you how to throw a basic punch and string them in combinations. You will then copy my movements, got it? Got it, Naruto mumbled lowly. What was that? Asked Zabuza. I couldn't hear you. Did you say, I need a good kicking, Zabuza? Well, okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. I said I got it. Naruto shouted, paling at the threat. Zabuza smirked underneath his mask. Oh, well, you should have spoken up then. Just for that you're getting extra sparring tonight. Naruto groaned while Zabuza moved up to one of the training posts. Now watch carefully, brat, because I'm only going to show you this once. Zabuza suddenly lashed out with his fist, punching the log with enough force to make it shake. It was fast enough that it was enough to leave a small dent in the log, but slow enough that Naruto could see it. Notice then when I throw a punch, I always start from the waist. This is so that my punches have enough power to actually do some damage. You should also notice that when my fist is near my waist, my hand is running perpendicular to the ground, yet when I throw it out, the fist corkscrews and ends up running horizontally by the time it's fully hyperextended. That is how a basic punch is thrown. Now hop to it, brat. Naruto stepped up to the unoccupied log and imitated Zabuza's motion, though his punch wasn't strong enough to budge the hunk of wood. Good. Now repeat with your other hand. The demon of the mist watched as Naruto did as told before turning to him, waiting for his next order. Don't just stop, dumbass. Keep it up until I tell you otherwise. Naruto growled slightly at the insult. What was that? Rather than answer, the blonde began throwing punches at the log. Zabuza watched Naruto continue this for a few minutes before stopping him and showing him a 4-hit kata comprised of 2 punches identical to the previous ones with 2 kicks in between. The Jonin then stepped back and watched as his temporary student repeated these movements. Eventually, due to the monotony of the act and muscle memory, the boy put too much weight into one of his punches. Zabuza's eyes narrowed as he saw the blonde begin to fall back into his old way of fighting. Stop. Naruto stopped mid-punch and turned to the swordsman with a raised brow. What's wrong? You screwed up, that's what. You lost focus and let your moves get sloppy. The masked man stated before walking away. Naruto tilted his head and then his eyes widened when Zabuza returned, carrying 2 boulders, each about 3 times the size of the Rinnegan bearer's head. Zabuza walked up to the boy as though the stones were as light as feather before dropping them at the blonde's feet. Pick those up and give me 20 laps around the clearing. What? Naruto yelled. You heard me. Now get to it, Zabuza said before pulling out a kunai. Or do you need some added incentive? It works so well with your water walking. Naruto's eyes widened, a trace of fear spreading across his face. No, that's all right. Naruto spoke in a hurried tone as he shot forward so fast one would almost think he used a body flicker, quickly picked up the boulders, holding them over his shoulders, and began running around the clearing. I'll do exactly as you said. Zabuza crossed his arms and watched. After 10 minutes, Naruto finally finished his laps. He dropped the boulders in front of Zabuza and crouched over, placing his hands on his knees as he breathed heavily. The Jonin allowed him to rest for a minute before jerking his head towards the log. That's enough rest, back to work. Naruto glared at his sensei and grumbled as he stepped up to the log again and got back to practice. After a few minutes, Naruto's made another move wrong. Stop. You screwed up again. Start running. Naruto turned back to Zabuza, his mouth agape and his eyes wide, before picking up the boulders and making another set of laps around the clearing. Sakura stood before Haku in their own clearing. Like his master, he had decided to build Sakura's fighting style from the ground up. He had Sakura undergo a similar exercise to what Zabuza had Naruto do, although he was much more forgiving about it, simply correcting her when she made a mistake and allowing her brief breaks. Unlike Naruto, Sakura did know how to throw a decent punch. That's not to say she didn't have her own problems, beyond her physical abilities or lack thereof. Sakura stopped her kata and turned to her temporary teacher. Haku, she began, causing the dark-haired boy gave her a questioning look. Can I ask why you have me doing this? I mean, you told me my form was good and that the problem was my style. So why do you have me practicing these katas? Haku raised a brow before crossing his arms and closing his eyes as he began to explain. Well, though that's true, that's not your only problem. No offense Sakura, but you're lacking in strength, speed and stamina. And though your form is good, as Zabuza said, you're not very skilled. There's also a large problem in your offensive strategy. You put all your strength into every attack, most likely in hopes of ending a battle quickly and pushing your enemy away. This doesn't mesh well with your lack of physical strength. You'll just tire yourself out without doing any real damage. He opened his eyes and looked at the pink-haired girl, who seemed a little dejected at what his assessment of her skills. But this can all be fixed in time. I taught you these katas to get you used to stringing attacks together. And I intend to teach you to attack the body's soft areas, such as the throat, nose, eyes, kidneys and the solar plexus. This will allow you to deal more damage and incapacitate your enemies quickly, to compensate for your current lack of stamina. There are also a few exercises I have in mind to help with your physical abilities. Sakura smiled slightly. I see. Thank you. A thought then occurred to her and she gained a worried look. Wait, what kind of exercises do you have in mind? You're not going to make me wear weights or something, are you? Haku's eyes showed disapproval and shook his head. No. While that would help you grow stronger and faster, the constant use of the muscles in your arms and legs in such a manner would cause them to become bulky, making you stronger at the cost of flexibility. I have other exercises in mind for you that will build your strength and speed more naturally. We'll get started on those later. Also, if I'm not mistaken, you've been dieting, haven't you? The pink-haired girl paled slightly and nodded. I'm going to have to ask you to stop and to start eating a normal diet. Sakura looked as if he had just asked her to do the impossible. But, if I do that, I'll lose my figure. She said, her tone fearful as she imagined herself becoming fat and becoming unattractive. Haku's eye twitched before he sighed. He was beginning to see why Zabuza was annoyed by the thought of training a fangirl, as he called her. Sakura, your body will need energy and nutrients for your muscles to develop. But I've spent all my life striving to maintain my figure. Which is probably part of the reason you have this problem now, Haku thought with another sigh. You needn't worry. Your body will use most of the calories as it develops, so it won't harm your figure if you continue training. Seeing her still unconvinced expression, he pressed, besides, your body needs the energy to grow properly. Without it, your growth will be stunted, and not just in muscle strength. That got Sakura's attention. Really? Yes. Not only does not eating properly slow the development of muscles, doing so while your body matures can also stunt your physical growth, and prevent your body from developing properly during puberty. Meaning, for example, you could wind up with smaller than you would have otherwise. He could see from the look on the girl's face that got to her. Anyway, I believe you've been practicing katas for long enough. Have you given any thought to what style you want to learn? How exactly do you wish to face an opponent? Sakura shook her head to clear her mind of the previous topic before her brow furrowed as she thought before answering. Well, Kakashi-sensei always said I have talent in genjutsu. I guess I'd like to use that to throw off my opponent and then defeat them before they can recover. I could use that to help my teammates too. Haku nodded. Good. But in terms of taijutsu and physical combat, to be honest, your style seems like something I'd like to use. Sakura said, and Haku raised an eyebrow. I've been reading those books you gave me, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in the medical skills you talked about. Using Senbon to target vital spots and pressure points sounds like a good way to fight. I'd also prefer to use speed over strength. I think I'd like to evade my opponent over trying to block their attacks if I could, and what you said earlier about targeting vulnerable areas sounds good if I get drawn into close combat. Haku nodded. Very well. I will teach you the basics of my style. We will work on increasing your speed and precision as I teach you all the body's weak points, and we'll work on your accuracy with Senbon to form the basis of your own style. However, you should keep in mind it'll take a lot of work to gain this level of speed and accuracy. Sakura hesitated for a few moments as she thought of what she was committing herself to before nodding. After a pause, Haku sighed and closed his eyes. The girl may have been a bit more willing to train after Zabuza's blunt assessment of her abilities, but she wasn't driven to really put her best into it. Sakura, let me ask you another question. Why did you become a ninja? His eyes opened and his gazed into her questioning stare. Why do you fight and wish to become strong? What do you mean? Exactly what I said, Haku replied before elaborating. You don't seem to be putting your all into this. Unlike your teammates, there seems to be nothing driving you. You're only putting as much effort into this lifestyle as your teacher demands of you. In doing so, you endanger the lives of your fellows. So I ask you, what was your motivation for becoming a kunoichi in the first place? After another pause he continued. In choosing to become a ninja, you've chosen a profession in which you will have to fight, kill, and risk your own life in order to survive. There are many other lines of work you could have chosen in which you would have been allowed to live peacefully. I myself do not like killing or inflicting harm. I became a ninja for two reasons. For the first, given my background and the bleak outlook of my life, I didn't have a choice. The second is loyalty and duty. When I had no future, no purpose, Zabuza was there. He saved me from a life on the streets and gave me a reason to live. For that reason, he is precious to me. To serve and protect him, I wish to become stronger. Sakura's eyes widened. Naruto wishes to become strong to fulfill his dreams and to protect his own precious people. Others who choose this life do so out of duty to their family, clan or village. Which they are more loyal to is up to the individual, but they all fight for the honor and well-being of what they've dedicated themselves to. Others fight because, like Naruto, there's something they wish to accomplish. Some fight for revenge. Though, hopefully, they don't allow themselves to be consumed by the hatred that drives them and may eventually find other things they care about. Their motivation is to gain the strength to strike down those who wrong them. Sakura's gaze fell to the ground as she considered Ice User's words. As she took in everything he was saying, a look of contemplation came over her face. Her brow furrowed when he spoke of revenge, remembering Sasuke's words when Kakashi asked about his dreams. I'm going to restore my clan. And destroy a certain someone. Others wish for power for selfish reasons. They care little, if at all, for the things others hold dear or even the lives of others and care only for their own advancement, always craving more power and recognition. Perhaps for selfish goals, perhaps simply for power's sake or out of a desire to be the strongest. Either way, they seek to grow strong for themselves. Haku's expression turned serious. What do you fight for, Sakura? Sakura muttered, still staring at the soil. For so long, she'd just been living life carefree. She'd thought only of positive things, like gaining Sasuke's affection. She knew the rules of shinobi conduct and what was expected of her as a kunoichi, but she hadn't really thought about it in so long. Similarly, she hadn't thought of the reason why she had chosen this life in so long. It was buried deep within her mind. Soon, the memory of her original motivation came to her. My father. She finally answered. My father was a shinobi. He died when I was very young, too young to even remember him. She looked up at the androgynous teen. I became a ninja because I wanted him to be proud of me. Haku nodded. So, you chose this life to follow in your father's footsteps. That is a good enough reason, but it doesn't seem to really motivate you. Maybe because, as you said, you have no memories of him. It is hard to fight on behalf of someone you never knew. Personally, I believe that one can only awaken their true strength when they have someone or something important that they wish to protect. He let his words sink in. Think of what I've said, and what you really wish to do or accomplish with what you learn. For now, let us begin, if you are ready. After a moment, Sakura nodded. Follow my movements as best you can. The boy said before shifting into a combat stance, which she imitated. Okay, Sasuke. Kakashi began as he looked down at the last Uchiha in Konoha, who was sitting with his arm propped up on his knee, panting slightly. Unlike his teammates, there were no major flaws that needed to be corrected in the boy's taijutsu, and he was quite proficient in his clan's fighting style for his age. There was always room for improvement, however, and he was sure what he was doing here would not only help with one weakness the boy had at the moment, it might also help deflate his ego a bit. While he was somewhat better than when they started, the young Sharingan wielder's arrogance was still an issue. Now that we've finished our warm-up, it's time we got started. Sasuke glared at his sensei as he got back on his feet. Since when had his idea of a warm-up been beating him into the ground? And what was worse, he had forbidden him from using the Sharingan. And Sasuke, remember, no Sharingan. Sasuke growled in anger. What's the point of this, Kakashi? Oh, you mean the reason you're not allowed to use your Sharingan? He questioned nonchalantly. I'm impressed. To be honest, I'd expected you to complain much sooner. Sasuke answered with an anger-filled stare. Fine, I'll answer your question. Better yet, how about I show you? Sasuke, I'm going to hit you in the center of your torso. Try to stop me, without your Sharingan. Sasuke's eyes widened. He quickly fell into a combat stance as Kakashi shot forward. Knowing where he was going to attack, Sasuke raised his guard, attempting to shield his torso. But it was to no avail. Faster than his eye could follow, Kakashi had closed the distance between them, his fist already past his guard and on a collision course with its target. Pain coursed through his system as his sensei's fist smashed into his solar plexus, the impact sending him flying through the air. The onyx-eyed boy landed on his back where he grabbed his stomach and chest, coughing as he tried to breathe. He gave his teacher a one-eyed glare while he tried to catch his breath. After a few moments, he began to stand. Do you understand what I'm trying to accomplish? The copy ninja asked. Seeing Sasuke's fierce look, he sighed. I guess not. Okay, we're going to do this again. And this time, since I know you're just itching to do so, you may use your Sharingan. Now, try to stop me. Sasuke smirked. Within the blink of an eye, his coal-colored irises bled crimson, 2 tomo marks appeared in his right eye, while one appeared in his left as he activated his clan's dojutsu. With the power of his clan's Sharingan, blocking his sensei's attack would be easy. Or so he thought. He saw the attack coming a mile away. It was as if Kakashi's fist was moving in slow motion. He could see everything. He knew exactly where the attack would hit, when it would hit, and could even judge the timing it would take to properly deflect the attack. It was with a slow widening of his eyes that Sasuke realized he still couldn't block. He could only watch as his sensei's attack rapidly approached, his eyes seeing the movement a second before it occurred, but his body simply too slow to keep up. He saw the fist once more pass his guard, now too close to avoid or dodge. He got hit hard. He hadn't even had the time to brace himself before his teacher's fist was buried in his gut once more, launching him into the air. It was there that it really sunk in, that horrible feeling of seeing something coming, but being completely unable to avoid or stop it. He landed on his back, holding his stomach and coughing as he tried to catch his breath. Kakashi looked down at the coughing boy. Maybe now you can understand. The silver-haired Jonin began, causing Sasuke to look up at him as he tried to breath. Your Sharingan didn't help you at all, did it? The Sharingan certainly is an impressive tool, but it's just that a tool, no matter how powerful, doesn't make a ninja truly great. Even though you knew where I was going to hit you, even though your Sharingan allowed you to predict my movements, you weren't able to avoid my attack. Your body simply wasn't able to keep up. He paused as he allowed his words to sink in and waited for Sasuke to sit up before continuing. As you know, the Uchiha style relies on your ability to predict your opponent's moves and counter them, which is why you're not allowed to use your dojutsu. We're training to improve your speed and reaction time, and using your eyes would hamper that. After all, if you see my attack coming from a mile away, then you would prepare for it rather than simply react. Realization dawned in the Genin's eyes at that, now understanding the reason he wasn't allowed to use his clan's famed eyes. Now, answer me this, Sasuke. My attack just now, if you were able to respond quickly enough to deflect it without the Sharingan, what would you be able to do with it? A smirk spread across Sasuke's face and the Jonin nodded. I see you understand. Good. Of course, we'll need to train your Sharingan too, but that will come later. Now, get back on your feet. The silver-haired man waited for his student to stand and hoped he took his words about his bloodline to heart. As the sun stood just above the horizon, Naruto laid on the ground before Zabuza. Zabuza looked up at the darkening sky for a moment before his gaze fell back to the blonde. Alright, I'd say that's enough for today. I'd say we made some good progress here. Zabuza said. That's good, Naruto said weakly. Good night. His head then fell, hitting the ground as he went limp. Wah! Hey! Zabuza stepped forward, eyeing the unconscious Genin. He nudged him with his foot twice, hoping for a response. When there was none, he sighed. He then kneeled down, picking the blonde up and swinging him over his shoulder. He then stood up and walked through the trees back to the main training ground. When he neared Kakashi, who was standing before an exhausted Sasuke, turned to him. Ah, Zabuza, I see you pushed Naruto a bit hard. Zabuza snorted. I see the stories I've heard about you left out that you have a talent for stating the obvious. Kakashi smiled at the former mist ninja. They also tend to leave out my humble personality and glowing sense of humor. Yeah, I'm sure they just forgot to mention those. Zabuza replied in a deadpan voice. Now, you mind telling me where this brat lives? The next day, Naruto continued to repeat the set of moves that Zabuza had shown him. He could at last throw punches and kicks that met Zabuza's standard, though he still had no real style. Okay, brat, that's enough. Zabuza spoke up, surprising the Genin a bit. It's about time you decided what kind of fighting style you want to learn. The boy's eyes gained an excited gleam, which was quickly taken away by the masked Jonin's next words. And for that, I want you to head to the library. What? Naruto almost yelled. Why do I have to go to that place? Because brat, it's the best way for you to see what's out there. There are countless fighting styles in existence and I'm not a walking encyclopedia of combat styles. If you had more of a fighting style to begin with, we might have been able to work with it and develop a style for you, but that isn't the case. Do you even have any idea how you want to fight? Besides wanting to beat up the enemy with strong attacks. Naruto looked to the ground. Well, Zabuza crossed his arms. Exactly. Now get to it. Naruto took a step forward as if to challenge the man, desperate to avoid going to one of the places he considered the most boring on the planet. Ah, come on. He then pointed in the direction of the main section of the training ground where the two Sharingan wielders trained. Can't I just ask Kakashi? With his Sharingan, he's probably copied dozens of different styles. The former Mist Ninja raised a brow. That's a good point, he conceded. But I think this will prove the better option. Now go. And I won't teach you anything else until you come back with something. Naruto's eyes widened before he quickly agreed and bolted off as Zabuza watched. Once the blonde was out of sight and he was alone, the former missing nin made his way over to a nearby tree, pulled out a familiar orange book and leaned back against the trunk as he flipped open to the page he left off and began reading. He may not borderline worship the text like a certain silver-haired Jonin, but he did enjoy it. As he began catching up, he considered what he was going to do with the rest of the day. The blonde wouldn't be back until at least tomorrow if he knew what was good for him. This would serve as a major part of his fighting style for the rest of his life. After making a brief stop at his apartment to get his backpack, Naruto found the village's library easily enough, though it had taken a while to find someone willing to give him directions. He stepped in through the building's double doors and his arms fell limp at his sides as his eyes scanned the massive room, looking over all the bookcases and walls covered in books and scrolls. Ah man, how am I ever going to find anything in all this? He asked himself as his eyes continued to wander. With a sigh, he decided he might as well get started. The blonde walked to the nearest bookcase, skimming over the titles in search of taijutsu style. 10 minutes later, Naruto let out a slight growl, his fist trembling at his sides as he walked down an aisle. He had found nothing even close to what he was looking for and he would have long since given up had it not been for Zabuza's threat. The Jinchuriki was about ready to pull his hair out as he reached the end of the rows and examined a wall of books, finding nothing on taijutsu. I can't believe this. How hard could it be to find one subject in this place? The blonde said, not noticing a nearby door opening silently. He turned and took 3 steps before suddenly crashing and falling backwards, landing on his rear and hearing someone else do the same. A noise of shock, feminine in origin, reached his ears and he opened his eyes to see who he'd run into. Before him sat a girl who seemed to be a little older than he was. She was wearing a white lab coat with a red dress. Her eyes were hidden like his own, though instead of sunglasses she wore odd, swirl-tinted glasses. She had a forehead protector wrapped as a sash around her waist, showing the girl was a kunoichi. Littered on the floor were 3 scrolls in a box the girl had been carrying. Ow. Oh, sorry about that. Naruto started to get up. No need to apologize. It was my fault, I wasn't paying attention, he said, extending his hand for her. She took it and he pulled her up. I've been told that happens a lot. The girl chuckled slightly as she brushed her coat and dress off as Naruto gathered the things she dropped. Thanks. I'm Shiho, she said as he handed her the box and scrolls. The blonde gave her a wide smile. The name's Naruto Uzumaki. Good to meet you. The girl seemed slightly surprised but then nodded. She had heard bad things about the kid in front of her, but he didn't seem that bad at all. With a smile of her own, she spoke. Well, it's nice to meet you too, even if we had a bumpy start. What brings you here today? Are you looking for something? Naruto's grin became tinged with excitement as he realized that this girl could probably help him locate what he was looking for. Yeah, is there a section on taijutsu styles around here? Shiho raised a brow. Of course. It's next to the weapon styles and physical conditioning segments. Do you want me to show you? Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Thanks a lot, I've been here forever. Shiho gave a giggle as she turned, leading him through the aisles until they reached the back wall. Whoa, Naruto said as his eyes roamed the wall before him, each shelf full of scrolls on various taijutsu styles. Well, I'll leave you to it. Good luck finding what you're looking for, Shiho said as she walked away. Thanks for the help, Naruto called back to her before turning back to the wall. Taking the nearest scroll, he began reading. Half an hour later, he sat on the floor, reading an open scroll. Surprisingly enough, he found he actually enjoyed this. The scrolls had detailed illustrations of the awesome moves he'd eventually be able to do if he chose this style, and he found himself imagining performing these attacks and counters, usually on Sasuke, as he read on. After another half hour, he found there were 3 styles he was interested in. His favorite relied on misdirection, on using counters and feints to make openings and baiting an opponent into seeing a non-existent opening. Problem was, it was lacking in offense. That was when he remembered Zabuza's words and got the idea to take the best of these different styles to form the base of his own unique one. Rolling up the scroll with a smile, he began to walk out before a thought struck him from out of nowhere. He quickly ran off to where he met Shiho and searched. After a few moments, he grinned before making a cross-shaped hand sign. In a flash, 5 shadow clones appeared and scattered, looking all over for the blonde girl. As soon as one clone located her, it dispersed, followed by the others since the search was over. The blonde quickly made his way to her location. He found her waiting, having noticed the clone and guessed that the real one wouldn't be far behind. Is there something else I can help you with? Yeah. Do you have anything on chakra control? Thanks again, Naruto called back, waving at the girl wearing the swirl-tinted glasses standing outside the library's door. He had found 3 scrolls he'd decided to check out, the taijutsu scrolls and 2 on advanced chakra control exercises he was sure would be useful later, all of which he kept in his backpack. He walked down the streets of Konoha, humming a tune. Despite his initial misgivings, his trip to the library had turned out well and the whole affair had put him in a good mood. He decided he'd finish off the day with no less than a dozen bowls of Ichiraku ramen. The perfect way to end a good day, or a bad one, or any one really. He stopped in his tracks when he saw Haku and Sakura walking towards him, laughing over something he hadn't heard. There was a brief flash of fear that the pair were on a date before he walked up to them. Sakura, Haku. The pink-haired girl and the androgynous teen turned to him. Naruto, what are you doing out here? Sakura asked. Oh, I was just coming from the library and thought I'd head to Ichiraku's. Sakura gave him an incredulous look. The library? You, the one who couldn't even spell chakra properly. Since when did you grow a brain? That hurts, Sakura. Naruto hung his head down, only to look up as he heard her giggle. I'm just kidding. So, I guess all that reading Kakashi-sensei had your clones do is already starting to pay off, huh? So, what were you looking for? Well, Zabuza-sensei said I should look for a fighting style I was interested in, but I found some scrolls on chakra control I thought might help me down the road. Haku nodded approvingly. I'm glad to see you're taking initiative. But enough about me, what are you 2 doing out here? Don't tell me you're on a date, Sakura. How could you do that to us? Sakura glared at him slightly. Don't be stupid, it's nothing like that. We're just friends. The blonde perked up. Oh, then how about joining me to Ichiraku's, huh? And then how about we do something? Just the 2 of us? Not a chance, Naruto. Sakura said flatly. Oh, come on. It could be fun and I'll pay for everything. What have you got to lose? How about my dignity? Sakura asked, getting annoyed. Naruto, get it through your head that I'm not going to date you. Ever. Not if you were the last male in the village. She then sighed and placed a hand on her face, not paying attention to the blonde's hurt expression. I was having a good time, and you've ruined it, as usual. Just go, okay? Haku looked shocked at the pink-haired girl as Naruto's face fell and he walked off dejectedly. Sorry. Haku's gaze went back and forth between his temporary charge and the retreating figure of the Jinchuriki before turning to Sakura with a frown. Sakura, have you always treated him that way? Huh? Sakura turned to him before she shrugged. Yeah, why? Why would you treat him like that? Did you see how much you hurt him? Sakura made a surprised sound before saying. Well, he's annoying. He's always gotten on my last nerves with almost everything he does. He's loud and obnoxious, and on top of that he's got this crush on me and he never leaves me alone about it. Quote. And that's reason enough to treat your teammate in such a manner. The ice user asked and Sakura seemed to consider his words. The teen sighed after a moment. Sakura, have you noticed how everyone looks at him? How much hatred he has directed at him by the people of this village? Sakura blinked. Well, recently yeah, but it's probably something he brought upon himself with all his stupid pranks. She said, though she secretly enjoyed the pranks in her inner self voiced that. Sakura, do you honestly think he could have pranked everyone in Konoha to the point that they'd all glare at him like that? Haku asked, causing the pink-haired Kunoichi to think about it for a moment. Sakura, do you remember what I told you about why he wants to get stronger? He would go to any lengths to protect those precious to him, and I'm sure you're among those people. Please ask yourself, are you being a good teammate, a good friend, to him? He said before heading off after the blonde, leaving Sakura standing in the middle of the street, lost in thought. Naruto sat at the counter of the ramen shop that was almost a second home to him, staring at the counter with a depressed expression on his face. Well, at least he had ramen to cheer him up. Tsuki walked over to his place, carrying his order. Orders up. Hey, what's the matter? You look like a lost puppy. Naruto sighed. It's nothing. The old man saw that he didn't want to talk about it and nodded. Well, here's your order, first bowls on the house. Thanks. Naruto replied before he began slurping down the food. He stopped when he sensed someone sit down beside him and looked up to find Haku. Hey, I thought I'd join you. The ice user said. Ah, hey there. Haku, right, Tsuki said, getting a nod in response. What can I get you? One bowl of shrimp ramen, please. He said before turning back to the blonde. After giving the blonde a few moments, he asked. Do you want to talk about what just happened? Naruto put on a fake smile. Nah, it's fine. She's usually like that when I push her too far. I'll be fine, and I'll get through to her someday. I know it. Haku sighed. Naruto, I understand that you like her, but you may want to tone it down a bit. Naruto turned to him. She feels like you're pestering her. It's part of the reason she treats you so poorly. Naruto's gaze fell back to his food, stirring the noodles in his bowl as he thought about what the ice user was saying. Actually, it might help if you learn a bit about manners and tact in general. I could help you with that, if you want. Naruto raised a brow. Huh, why do I need to learn that? It's not going to help me be a better ninja. Perhaps not, but it may help you become a good leader. Seeing Naruto's questioning gaze, he elaborated. I've noticed that you don't treat most people with much esteem. While ignoring formalities and social standing is fine in some situations, such as with friends or people who don't care about such things, there are cases where showing the proper respect is necessary, and from what I've seen, you wouldn't bother with it even in those cases, and aspects of your behavior, mainly your manners and tendency to announce your presence and show off, are not only trying but in the latter cases unbecoming of a ninja. I don't know. It might make you less annoying to Sakura. And it could only help you in the future. You'll find some people are not amused by dismissing formality and etiquette. Your dream is to become Hokage, right? Naruto nodded. As Hokage, you'll have to meet with the daimyo of this country and foreign leaders, including other Kage. While some won't care, or possibly even find your lack of social graces refreshing, others will be offended. You could even potentially cause negotiations for an alliance to break down or start a war. Naruto blinked. Though he didn't really get it, he had seen how he could get on some people's nerves, though the feeling was generally mutual. The image of him, older and wearing the Hokage robes he desired so much, speaking to a foreign cage, annoying him as he had Sakura and several others, and causing a breakdown of negotiations. He then thought of how the people of the village would claim he was a poor leader because of it, or the worse alternative, a war breaking out, simply because he offended the other leader. With a jerk and a shake of his head as if to rid the thoughts from his mind, he quickly turned to Haku. Could something like that really happen just because of the way I act? Seeing Haku nod, he cringed slightly. Well, if it helps me be a better Hokage, I guess I have no choice, though I'm not going to make any promises. Besides, I've got nothing to lose. Haku smiled. That's all I ask. And it's not like you'll have to act differently all the time. You just need to learn when the situation calls for it. And speaking of manners and tact, Ayame commented as she came up to them, placing her elbows on the counter, chin on the butt of her hands, as she leaned against it. Her eyes flickered over to Haku briefly, blushed, then looked back at Naruto. We should probably start with your eating habits. They're absolutely atrocious. Naruto blinked. Haku nodded in concurrence with the ramen waitress's words. I agree, I've seen you eat, especially ramen. Your eating habits are so bad that I've seen a few people get sick just watching you. He looked over at Ayame and smiled. Thank you for pointing that out, Ayame. Ayame blushed. No problem. But, now, I believe we should get started as soon as possible. Haku clapped his hands. Every day after your training with Zabuza, you will come here in Ayame and I will begin imparting manners and good eating habits to you. Right. Ayame nodded her head effusively. Naruto looked at the two with wide, pleading eyes. But do not worry, Naruto. This will not interfere with your training in any way. And it will definitely help you with women in the long run. Ayame tossed her favorite customer a wink. No girl likes a slob, after all. But Ayame is quite right. If you want to impress a woman, then you need to have good table manners. Naruto looked at the two of them in despair. Are either of you listening to me?